Picture a hotel ballroom in Victoria Island, Lagos. 400 guests in their finest clothes, white roses on every table, gold chairs lined in perfect rows. A string quartet near the entrance playing something slow and European. The kind of music chosen to signal that money is present and taste has been considered. Now, picture a woman walking to the front of that hall, not in a wedding dress, not carrying flowers, in a grey suit, while her sister stands at the altar in white. The room goes quiet before she opens her mouth. 400 people watching, the bride turning slowly, and in her eyes, not surprise, not confusion, recognition. The specific, terrible recognition of someone who knows exactly what they have done and is watching it finally arrive. The woman in grey is holding a microphone. Behind her, a laptop is being connected to the venue's presentation screen, the same screen that 10 minutes ago was displaying the couple's engagement photos. Her name is Amara Okeke. She is the second daughter, the quiet one, and this is how she got there. Because it did not start in that ballroom. It started 14 months earlier, in the silence underneath a phone call, a silence Amara heard and did not understand until it was almost too late. Growing up in their house in Enugu, there was an unspoken rule that no one ever stated out loud. Chioma was the sun. Amara was the window everyone looked through to see her. When Chioma walked into a room, the air changed. She had a way of smiling, slow, practiced, like she already knew what the person across from her was going to say and had already decided how to respond. She gathered boys, like some people collect things they don't particularly need, casually, without effort, simply because they were there. Amara was the other one, the one who studied while Chioma danced, the one who stayed inside while her sister filled the compound with noise and laughter. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone in the family understood. Chioma was the one who would marry well, Amara was the one who would work hard. The funny thing about life is this: sometimes it listens to neither of you. By the time Amara turned 29, she had built a real estate consulting career from almost nothing. Late nights, rejected proposals, a salary that barely covered rent for 3 years before it finally began to grow. She didn't have Chioma's ease or her magnetism. What she had was patience, a terrible, stubborn patience that refused to let go of anything it had decided to hold. Chioma, by then, had been through 2 broken engagements and a business she had started and quietly abandoned. She never complained. She simply adjusted her angle the way a mirror tilts to catch different light. Then, Amara met David Adebayo. He was a client at first, a self-made real estate developer from Lagos who had come to Enugu for a large commercial project. Their first meeting was a property assessment that ran 3 hours over schedule because they kept disagreeing about the land valuation. David thought Amara was wrong. Amara knew she was not. By the end of the meeting, he was laughing. "You're either very confident or very stubborn," he said. "Both, and I'm right," he told her. He sent her a message that evening, professional. Then another one the next morning, less professional. What followed was 14 months of something that felt very much like being chosen, not for how she looked or how easily she filled a room, but for the way she thought, the way she argued, the way she refused to back down from something she believed in. David Adebayo was not a man who needed someone decorative. He was a man who needed someone real. The proposal came on a quiet Thursday evening in his living room in Lekki. No cameras, no performance, just a ring, a question, and his eyes watching hers with something in them she had never seen anyone aimed directly at her before. She said yes. Of course she said yes. Amara called Chioma first, before her mother, before her closest friend, Somachi. She called Chioma because she was her sister and she was the happiest she had ever been. And when you are that happy, you reach instinctively for the people who are supposed to celebrate with you. Chioma screamed, she cried, she said all the right things. Amara should have listened more carefully, not to what her sister said, but to what lived in the silence underneath it. The engagement changed something in Chioma, something subtle enough that Amara kept dismissing it as excitement. Chioma offered to help with everything. She moved through the wedding planning as though she was the one getting married. Vendor meetings, decor decisions, fabric selections. She was always present, always asking questions, always borrowing Amara's phone to quickly check something while Amara was distracted with food samples or seating charts. Amara thought she was being generous. She thought, this is what sisters do. This is what love looks like when it takes a practical form. She was wrong about almost everything. Much later, after everything had broken open and been examined and documented, a man named Uchenna Nwachukwu would sit across Amara in a quiet office in Ikeja and explain, in the careful voice of someone who has seen this kind of thing before and still finds it disturbing, exactly what Chioma had spent those months doing. But Uchenna came later. In those early weeks, Amara only knew that something was beginning to go wrong, and she could not find the edge of it. If this story is already pulling at something in you, you are not alone. Subscribe to Stories by Abby and hit the notification bell, because what comes next will change the way you see everything. It started with David's cousin, Rotimi. He pulled David aside at a family dinner and said he had heard things about Amara, that she had been involved with someone else during the relationship, that there were messages. David told Amara about it 3 days later, almost apologetically. He said he had told Rotimi he was wrong. He just wanted her to know it had been said. Amara told him it was a lie. David believed her, or he tried to. Then the screenshots arrived. There is no easy way to describe what it feels like to be shown a conversation that looks exactly like something you wrote, the phrasing, the rhythm, even the emojis, but that you did not write. It is like watching your own reflection do something your body never moved to do. The messages showed Amara telling a man called Ekene that she was only with David for his investment connections, that she found him boring, that she was planning to leave after the wedding was done, and the doors it opened had been walked through. Amara had never spoken to anyone called Ekene in her life, but the metadata said the messages came from her number. A writing style analysis, neatly prepared and attached as though by a concerned third party, confirmed her patterns. And then came the voice notes. Her voice, saying things she had never said, assembled from recordings she had not known were being taken, stitched together from family gatherings, from evenings in her own flat, from moments she had believed were private. Something shifted inside Amara that has never fully shifted back. David's mother stopped returning Amara's calls. His sister sent a long message that will not be repeated here. Amara saved it anyway, because even then, even in the middle of that chaos, something in her understood that everything happening might one day need to be documented. She fought back. She showed David her actual messages, her real history, every piece of evidence she could produce to contradict what was being claimed. But every time she brought something forward, new evidence appeared to meet it, counter-evidence, reframing evidence, evidence that arrived with perfect suspicious timing. And Chioma was always there, always present during these conversations, always sorrowful, always composed in that way she had, the way that had always read as warmth, and now, in hindsight, could only be described as control. A hand on David's shoulder, a soft expression that said, "I wish none of this were true." Once, she said something that Amara has returned to many times since. "Maybe," she said very gently, "we've all been hurt by someone we didn't fully know." She said it looking at David, not at Amara. 3 weeks before the wedding, David called. He didn't raise his voice, he just sounded tired. that specific exhaustion of a person who has used up everything last they had to give. Amara sat on the floor of her apartment for a long time after that call, long enough that the light changed from afternoon to evening. She did not get up to turn on the lamps. There is a specific kind of grief that comes from being falsely accused. It is not only the loss of the person or the relationship, it is the horror of watching people you trust accept a version of you that does not exist and being completely unable to make them see the lie. Amara lost weight. She stopped cooking. She went to work because the alternative was to not go to work, and she had learned a long time ago that momentum was the only antidote to collapse. You keep moving, you keep showing up, you hold yourself together with the routine of ordinary days until something in you knits back enough to bear weight. Somachi stayed close, Amara's best friend, the person she had trusted most outside her family. But Amara noticed carefully that Somachi never fully said she believed her. There was a hesitation in her voice that Amara recognized, the sound of someone trying to love you and stay neutral at the same time. Chioma called, concerned, sisterly. She brought food to Amara's flat twice and sat with her while she cried. She let her lean. She held her hand. She held Amara's hand while she was the reason Amara's hands were shaking. Amara didn't know that yet, but she felt something, a low, persistent wrongness beneath everything, something she could not name and could not locate and could not shake. 3 months after the breakup, Chioma began seeing David. She told Amara it had happened naturally, that they both were hurting, that she hoped Amara would understand someday. Amara did not speak to her for 6 weeks. Then their mother was briefly hospitalized, exhaustion, nothing serious, and family circumstances pushed the sisters back into the same rooms. Amara watched Chioma at her mother's bedside, patient, warm, saying all the right things in exactly the right order with exactly the right expression on her face. And Amara remembers thinking, she has always been this. How many times had she called that love when it was something else entirely? The thought sat in her like a seed, small and completely impossible to ignore. A recovered photograph, one Amara didn't delete and didn't remember taking, of Chioma at her laptop in her bedroom during the engagement period. The timestamp in the file metadata placed it at 2:17 a.m. Chioma had told her she had gone to bed early that night. She had kissed Amara on the cheek on her way to the guest room. Amara did not confront her. Something told her not to. Instead, she sat down at that same laptop and looked. The browser history had been cleared, carefully, completely. But Amara was a woman who had spent years in an industry where documents and records were everything, where a deleted file could cost a contract and a missing timestamp could cost a case. 3 years earlier, after a laptop was stolen, Amara had set up an automatic cloud archive, a background system that logged file activity and synced it quietly, invisibly, to a server she had long since stopped thinking about. She logged in. She started reading. She read for 4 hours. By the time she stopped, it was almost dawn, and she understood with a cold, complete clarity that what had happened to her was not bad luck. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not even jealousy in the ordinary sense. It was a campaign, deliberate, systematic, 14 months in the making. She knew exactly who to call. Uchenna Machuku ran a small digital forensics firm from his second-floor office in Ikeja. He had a face that showed nothing and eyes that missed nothing. Amara found him through a contact at work, told him everything and gave him access to every device, every account, every archive she had. He took 6 weeks. He called on a Tuesday morning and asked her to come in. He had prepared a presentation, slides, the kind of meticulous, layered documentation that Amara recognized from years in her own industry as the work of someone who understood this might eventually be shown to a court. He walked her through it slowly, piece by piece, each one worse than the last. Chioma had accessed Amara's Gmail account 17 times over 11 months, using a session token she had harvested from Amara's laptop browser during the weeks she spent helping with wedding planning. She had read everything: client communications, personal conversations with David, private messages to Somachi, everything. She had created a second email account nearly identical to Amara's, a single letter changed in the username, and used it to contact Rotimi, David's cousin, posing as a mutual acquaintance with concerns about Amara's behavior. The fake screenshots had been built using real messages extracted from Amara's phone during the times Chioma borrowed it, layered with fabricated content using a photo editing application downloaded to a device registered in Chioma's name. The voice notes, Amara's voice, saying things she had never said, had been assembled from covert recordings Chioma made at family gatherings and inside Amara's flat, stitched together with audio editing software. She had been patient, methodical. She had not rushed. Uchenna slid a folder across the desk. It's all there. Every login, every file, every trace. This is enough for a criminal charge: identity fraud, cybercrime, defamation, at minimum. Amara sat with the folder in her hands. She thought about Chioma holding her hand while she cried. Chioma at their mother's bedside. Chioma in a white dress somewhere in Lagos at this very moment, believing she had won. And she made a decision. She was not going to confront Chioma in private, not in a quiet room where Chioma could adjust her expression and find the right words and tilt herself once again toward the light that suited her best, not in a way that gave her any room at all. Amara was going to wait for the wedding day, and she was going to be ready. In the weeks that followed, she worked quietly and carefully with Uchenna and with a lawyer named Barrister Ikenna Obiora, who specialized in cybercrime cases and had a reputation for preparing airtight presentations. The police unit that handled digital and financial crimes was briefed in full. Officers in plain clothes were arranged to attend the ceremony. A detective would wait outside in a car. Amara chose her outfit deliberately. A grey suit, not the white she had once imagined wearing in a different life. Grey, the color of something that has already been through weather and is still standing. Somachi came with her. She had seen the folder by then. She had sat across from Amara in her kitchen and cried for almost an hour, then apologized for every moment of hesitation, every careful neutrality, every half-belief. Amara had forgiven her before she finished asking. They arrived at the hotel before the processional began, before the guests had fully settled, before the music changed. The ballroom was everything Amara had once helped plan for a different occasion: white roses, gold chairs, a ceiling draped in fabric that caught the light, 400 guests in their finest clothes, the comfortable noise of people who believe they are gathered for a celebration. Amara saw Chioma before Chioma saw her. She was near the altar in a fitted white gown, speaking quietly to a bridesmaid, her head tilted at that angle Amara knew her whole life, the one that said she was performing ease without effort. David stood at the front of the room in a dark suit. His face had the look of a man who has convinced himself he is certain about something. The room noticed Amara before either of them did. There was a ripple of stillness, not dramatic, not loud, just that specific hush that moves through a crowd when something is about to fundamentally change and no one yet knows what it is. Chioma turned. Amara has thought about her sister's face in that moment many times since. There was a flash of something there, not guilt, not yet, but recognition, pure and immediate and total. The recognition of someone who knows exactly what they have done, watching it walk towards them in a grey suit. A hotel staff member who had been quietly briefed passed Amara a microphone. She spoke clearly. "My name is Amara Okeke. I am Chioma's younger sister. I am here because 14 months ago, my sister began a deliberate, systematic campaign to destroy my relationship with David Adebayo. I have proof, and I would like to share it now. before this ceremony continues. The room erupted. David's mother rose from her seat. His sister grabbed the arm of the person beside her. Someone behind her said something she couldn't make out over the noise. Chioma said her name once, sharply, the way you say a word you are trying to use as a war. Uchenna and Barrister Obiora moved forward from where they had been standing near the back. They connected the laptop to the presentation screen, the same screen that had been displaying engagement photos of Chioma and David, their faces soft and certain. Now it showed login records, timestamps, the near-identical email account, screenshots of the original audio files placed side by side with the doctored voice notes, the metadata trails that led without ambiguity to a device registered to Chioma Okeke. The hall went absolutely silent. Amara looked at David. He was standing completely still. His face was doing something he had never seen it do in all the time he had known him. That particular collapse of a person, realizing that everything they believed about a period of their own life has just been corrected all at once in front of 400 people. He had let go of something real because of Chioma. He had stood at this altar for her, and she had built the path to it on the wreckage of what they both could have had. Chioma did not run. People always expect a certain kind of exit. Instead, she stood very still, and the color in her face changed. And then she began to speak, quietly at first, and then louder, and then the words stopped making sense, even to the people standing closest to her. The detective entered through the side doors. It was not loud. It was not the scene people imagine when they imagine this kind of moment. Chioma was led out of her own wedding quietly, her white dress catching on the legs of the gold chairs as she passed. 400 people watched her leave. The string quartet near the entrance was still playing. They hadn't been told to stop. People ask Amara sometimes whether she felt satisfied, whether the wedding day reveal was everything she had imagined. The honest answer is, it felt nothing like what she had pictured. She had imagined relief, maybe even something like triumph. What she actually felt standing in that silent ballroom was very tired, the kind of tired that lives in the chest and doesn't move for days. Chioma was charged under Nigeria's Cybercrimes Act. The case moved slowly, like these things do. She was released on bail. She moved back to Enugu. Her mother did not speak to Amara for 8 weeks, convinced she had handled it wrong, that she had confronted Chioma privately first, that she had chosen spectacle over family. Amara understood why her mother felt that. She did not agree. David called 2 days after the wedding. They met at a restaurant near his office. He sat down and looked at her for a moment before he said anything. He had dark circles under his eyes. He looked like someone who had not slept since Saturday. "I'm sorry, Amara. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for what I knew was true."
Amara had rehearsed that conversation many times. In the shower, in traffic, in the silences at work. In every version, she was measured and dignified and said something true, but not cruel. What she actually said was, "I know, and I forgive you, but we can't go back." David nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He already knew. They sat for another hour, talking the way people talk when they know every word matters and they can no longer afford to waste any of them. They talked about what had been real. They talked about what they had both lost. They left with a handshake that became briefly a hug. Amara went home and allowed herself finally to cry. Not for him, not for the relationship, for the version of herself who had been sitting in that living room in Lekki on a quiet Thursday evening, saying yes and meaning it completely. She deserved to grieve. Amara gave her one long night. Then she got up. Because here is what matters and why this story is worth telling at all. Chioma did not steal Amara's identity. She tried to. What she actually stole was time. 14 months, a relationship, and a version of a future Amara had let herself imagine. Those are real losses. They mattered. They still do. But here is what Chioma could not take. The career Amara had built before David, brick by brick, in the years before anyone was watching. the colleagues who eventually sat with the evidence and understood. Somachi, Amara's own knowledge of who she was, which was never stored in a screenshot, never accessible through a borrowed phone, never something that could be altered in editing software. The thing about someone trying to become you is this: they can imitate you. They can steal your words, reconstruct your voice, wear your credibility like a costume, but they cannot sustain it because it was never rooted in anything real about them. Chioma spent 14 months building a version of Amara she could replace. She thought she was destroying her sister. What she was actually doing was constructing something with no foundation. It collapsed the moment it met the truth. And Amara Okeke is still standing. If this story moved something in you, share it. Subscribe to Stories by Abby, because what's built on someone else's ruin never lasts, and the quiet ones, they always find their way back. Her name was Amara Okeke, the second daughter, the quiet one. She was still here.